There it is, Mont Saint-Michel. What do you think? Beautiful. Yeah, you want to do something different? You want to walk over there?
Walk across that swamp?
Yeah, just like our ancestors did, centuries and centuries and centuries and centuries ago. You're the one that want to do all the walking. Come on, let's go. Look at this, look at this, look at this. This thing has been functioning for hundreds of years. Since before the beginning of modern times.
Yeah, but this is different from the kind of time you were talking about before. Sunrise to sunset, Sabbath to Sabbath, isn't it? This is mechanical time, isn't it?
You bet it is, you bet. I sometimes think that this clock, this machine, is what constitutes humanity's first real break from the world of nature. Wouldn't you say so? Hello?
The clock did much more than that. It became the model of the cosmos. And then they mistook the model for the real thing. People got the idea that nature was just a giant clock, not a living organism, but a machine.
That's exactly what I've been trying to tell this lunkhead. Exactly, word for word. Maybe you recognize him. Jack Edwards? And you're?
Sonia Hoffman. I think I've heard your name somewhere.
Yeah, maybe in a couple of hundred news broadcasts. He was a candidate for the U.S. presidency in the primaries.
Oh, I vaguely remember. See, I'm not a voter.
Most Americans don't vote either.
I do know who you are.
Me? You know who I am? I doubt it.
You're Thomas Harriman, the poet.
Well, yes, I am, but wait a minute. Let me get this straight. You recognize me, a poet whose latest work sold all of 12,000 copies, but you do not recognize this gentleman who was a presidential candidate in America? My God, woman, what's happened to your values? What do you do?
I'm a scientist, and we do occasionally read poetry. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a lot of it these days. I'm on a sort of sabbatical. I'm an ex-physicist, an ex-American resident, an ex-voter.
Ex-wife?
This is very upsetting. Why don't intelligent people like yourself bother to vote?
Well, forgive me, you politicians make it so hard. The ideas expressed by most of you, right and left, seem to me as antique and mechanical as that old clock.
What's that supposed to mean?
Well, if I was to explain that, I'd have to go all the way back to Descartes, if you remember him.
Yeah?
To be or not to be?
I think, therefore I am.
Yeah, well, we both went to college, yeah.
Well, Descartes was the primary architect of the view that sees the world as a clock. A mechanistic view that still dominates most of the world today, and it seems to me, especially you politicians.
Mechanistic. Is that a real word?
Mechanistic, mechanical, mechanics? Yeah, it's a good word.
Mechanistic, as if nature functioned like a clock. You take it apart, reduce it to a number of small, simple pieces, easy to understand, analyze them, put them all back together again, and then you understand the whole.
Isn't that what's known as scientific thinking, Miss Hoffman? Really? What you call the mechanistic view, isn't that what the scientific method's all about?
Is it?
Well, I don't think so, but I'd like to kind of hear from the physicist, Jack.
All right, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Well, you're right in a way, Mr.
Jack. Call me Jack.
Okay, Jack. You are right in a sense. But it wasn't always so. Not before Descartes. When he introduced such thinking, it amounted to a revolutionary break with the church. He said, I don't need the Pope to tell me how the world functions. I can find that out for myself. Because to me, the world is just a machine. And then he became fascinated with clockworks and made the clock into a central metaphor. He said, I consider the human body as nothing but a machine. A healthy man is like a well-made clock. A sick man is like an ill-made clock.
Well, the metaphor seems a little clumsy now, but it worked, didn't it?
Yes, so successfully that scientists came to believe that all living things, plants, animals, us, are nothing but machines. And that's the fallacy. It carried over into everything, arts, politics.
I don't know, it seems to me that most people don't even remember who Descartes was.
I'm sorry, I guess I just don't follow you. But he'd like to. If you could just break it down into 30-second media bites, that's more what he's used to.
Very funny. All right, what is it that I don't recognize? What's so bad about Descartes?
But there's nothing bad about Descartes. In fact, I think Descartes is wonderful. He was a godsend to the 17th century. But times have changed since then. We need a new way of understanding life. That pendulum, for example, has long since been replaced by a tiny quartz crystal. And these magnificent hand-forged wheels turned into a microchip the size of my thumbnail. That's how far modern science has left mechanistic thinking behind. But you politicians, you seem to have that clockwork still ticking in your head. I could use Newton's equations to calculate and explain every motion of that throw, from the ballistic curve to the ripples in the water. See, this was a feat so impressive for the time that Newton's mathematical system immediately established itself as the correct theory of reality, the ultimate laws of nature. Descartes' dream of the world as a perfect machine was now an established fact. It brought with it such a wealth of benefits for people. People could do things they'd never been able to do before. It was irresistible. And of course, the old notions of the world as a living organism was swept away.
So what's wrong with Newton?
You know, it's no accident that Turner painted light when he did, or that light became the inspiration of the Impressionists. The nature of light became an obsession with the physicists, too. See, none of them could visualize how the light of the sun reached the earth.
Why? What is the nature of light?
To understand the nature of light, you have to know what matter is made of.
I thought it was made of atoms.
What's an atom? Well, Newton thought it was small, solid particles. But that's not what scientists saw when they observed atoms for the first time. What they saw was totally unexpected and shocking.
You mean when they discovered that atoms were made up of even smaller particles, a nucleus with electrons whirling around it?
Not only that, they were moving in relatively vast regions of empty space. That's what shocked the scientists up. Atoms consist mainly of empty space.
What does that mean, vast regions of empty space? Atoms are tiny.
Yes, they are. This is what's so hard to visualize. See, the size of atoms is so far removed from our ordinary sense of scale and proportion that it's extremely hard to get a feeling for the relative sizes and distances of their particles. Ask yourself, how many atoms are there in an orange? Now, to answer this, you'll have to blow up the orange to a size where you can actually see the atoms. You'll have to blow up the orange until it's reached the size of the Earth. The atoms inside of it will then be the size of cherries. Myriads of cherries tightly packed into an orange the size of the Earth.
Wow, what an image. I'm serious. I was trying to shrink the earth orange back down into the size of an orange and imagine all those cherries whizzing around inside of it. It made me dizzy. This is a dangerous height to be dizzy at. But okay, you say that the atom is the size of a cherry and that in that cherry atom, there's all this empty space. Well, what about the nucleus? There is a nucleus in there, right? I mean, how big is that? That's where we're going here, isn't it?
Invisible is the answer. If we blow up the atom to the size of a football, the nucleus would still be invisible. If we blow up the atom to the size of a sphere that would fit into this room here, the nucleus would still be invisible.
What if you blew it up to the size of this island, to the size of the rock we're standing on?
Okay. We would blow the atom, the cherry, up to the size of this island. Okay, then the nucleus would be the size of a small pebble. Something like that. And the electrons would be much smaller still. We would have to look for them all the way down there, at the edge of the island. And the whole space in between would be empty.
Wow, that's fantastic. It's weird. It's even weirder than poetry.
So what you're saying is that if there were a sphere large enough to contain this whole island, what it would actually consist of is a pebble and a few grains of sand. That's all this huge sphere contains. In other words, nothing. It's empty. But if this rock is made up of spheres like that, then what makes it so solid? Why can't I pass my hand through it? Why don't we fall through it?
Yeah, why don't we fall through everything? Why doesn't everything fall through everything?
Well, you see, this is the obvious question that physicists had to ask. Now remember that all the Newtonian concepts were based on things that could actually be seen, or at least visualized. But what they were now finding in this strange and unexpected world were concepts that could no longer be visualized. And when they went on battling with this absurd phenomena of atomic physics, they were forced to admit to themselves that they didn't have a language, not even an adequate way of thinking to describe their new discoveries. They were forced to think in entirely new ways in terms of radically new concepts. To understand why matter is so solid, they had to question the conventional ideas about the very existence of matter. And after many frustrating years, they were forced to admit that matter does not exist with certainty in definite places, but rather shows tendencies to exist.
Tendency? What the hell does that mean?
Now, let's say we want to observe an electron out there. Now, we cannot say that it is in a definite place. We can rather say it has a tendency to be out there in the front rather than in the back. Or here to the left rather than over there to the right. In scientific language, we actually don't speak about tendencies. We speak about probabilities.
I seem to remember voting for a bill in the Senate that gave some physicists a lot of money for a detector that they said would tell them exactly where an electron is. Were we being gypped?
Not at all. The strange thing is that when you actually make a measurement of the electron, it is in a definite place. But between measurements, you cannot say that it is in a definite place, or that it has traveled a definite path from one place to another.
You mean when you want to measure it, it just sort of shows up?
Yeah.
Oh, kind of like out-of-work actors or presidential candidates like Jack Edwards. What do you think? What do you think? Hey, tough guy.
Yeah.
Oh, my knees hurt.
Okay, let me get this straight. You measure it and the electron is there. It shows up, like Tom said. But in between measurements, you can't say for sure that it's in a definite place, or even that it went on a definite path from one place to another. So how does it go from here to there? It moves, doesn't it?
No.
You mean it stays in the same place?
No.
Well, wait a minute. Either the electron moves or it doesn't move.
Well, you can't say that. Well, are you getting a feeling now of what these physicists felt? You see, an electron doesn't move from place to place, and it doesn't stay in one place either. It manifests itself as probability patterns spread out in space. And the shape of these probability patterns changes with time, something which might seem like movement to human perception.
Are you saying that the electron sort of gets smeared out over a large region, and then when you measure it with the measuring gun, it collapses into a small point?
You got it. You see, all subatomic particles, electrons, protons, neutrons, manifest this strange existence between potentiality and reality.
So at the subatomic level, there are no solid objects.
No, they are not.
Well, if there are no solid objects at the subatomic level, how are there solid objects at any level?
That's the amazing thing. This simple question, what makes this rock so solid, goes way beyond our power of imagination. I mean, I cannot explain this to you in visual terms. Of course, I can do it in mathematical equations, but there's no metaphor for it.
How can you live in a world that's unmetaphorical? I mean, you have to perceive reality in some way. I mean, this is solid.
Okay. Let's take an atom from within this granite, a silicon atom with its 14 electrons. Now, the probability patterns of these electrons arrange themselves like shells around the nucleus, each shell containing several electrons. Now, within the shells, the electrons are everywhere at the same time, so to speak. But the probability patterns that resemble shells are extremely stable and very hard to compress.
Matter is solid because probability patterns are difficult to compress.
That's as good as it gets.
So I was right to sleep through Mr. Giddis's physics class. That little model he made out of Tinker Toys with sticks and balls, that was wrong, right?
Right, wrong. Yeah, it's a lousy visualization, but then no one did it any better.
If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear as it is, infinite. William Blake. So, Sonia, life's a bunch of probability patterns running around. Probability patterns of what?
Of interconnections.
What?
Well, what I'm trying to say is that these probabilities are not probabilities of things, but probabilities of interconnections.
See, Jack, that's what she was trying to tell you.
See, we tend to think of subatomic particles as some kind of small billiard balls or small grains of sand. But for physicists, a particle has no independent existence. A particle is essentially a set of relations that reach outward to connect with other things.
What are those other things, please?
They are interconnections of yet other things, which also turn out to be interconnections, and so on and so on. You see, in atomic physics, we never end up with any things at all. The essential nature of matter lies not in objects, but in interconnections.
Everybody knows the chord. It's a third, the most basic of harmonies. Carries with it a very distinctive feeling, no? And yet, its individual notes carry none of that feeling. Therefore, the essence of the chord lies in its...
Lies in relationships.
And the relationship between time and pitch...
Makes melody.
Makes melody. Relationships make music.
Relationships make matter.
Music of the spheres.
As Kepler said.
And Shakespeare before him.
And Pythagoras before him. Now, this vision of a universe arranged in harmonies of sounds and relations is no new discovery. Today, physicists are simply proving that what we call an object, An atom, a molecule, a particle is only an approximation, a metaphor. At the subatomic level, it dissolves into a series of interconnections, like chords of music. It's beautiful.
Yeah, but there are boundaries, aren't there? I mean, between you and me, for instance. We are two separate bodies, aren't we? That's not an illusion. Is it? Are you saying that there is actually a physical connection between you and me and between you and the wall behind you and the air and this bench?
Yes. At the subatomic level, there is a continual exchange of matter and energy between my hand and this wood, between the wood and the air, and even between you and me. I mean a real exchange of photons and electrons. Ultimately, whether we like it or not, we're all part of one inseparable web of relationships.
How does all this explain light?
Yes, finally. Light. Now, light doesn't need a medium, because although it travels in waves, it also travels as particles.
Light is both particles and waves?
Yes, but the particles of light, which we call photons, are of a very special kind. Unlike other particles, they never stand still. They never speed up, they never slow down. They always travel at the same speed, the speed of light. And the waves are not ordinary waves, like water waves. They are abstract patterns of probabilities, traveling in the form of waves.
Patterns of relationships like everything else.
Exactly.
I get it. Well, I don't get it, but I get it.
Let there be light.
And like light, a great variety of other high-energy particles, cosmic rays, bombard the Earth. All these particles colliding with the air, creating more particles, interacting further, creating and destroying more particles. And we are in the middle of this cosmic dance of creation and destruction, all of us, all the time.
Shiva Nataraj.
I beg your pardon?
Shiva Nataraj, the Hindu god of dance. The Hindus believe that Shiva's dance sustains the universe, that Shiva's dance is the universe. The ceaseless flow of energy going through a multiplicity of patterns, dissolving into one another.
That's physics.
No, that's poetry.
That's wonderful.
You, we, all of us, we need a new vision of the world, and we need a more comprehensive, more inclusive science to support us. There is a new theory emerging now, which places all the ecological concepts we've been talking about into one coherent scientific framework. We call it systems theory, the theory of living systems.
Living systems?
Mm-hmm. All living organisms, as well as social systems and ecosystems. See, this theory would help us get a much firmer grasp on the sciences that deal with life.
Are these all your own ideas, or do other people share them? I mean, has this been applied in the sciences anywhere?
Am I a crank? It's okay, Senator. This is real science. And many scientists, including some Nobel laureates, have been working on these ideas. Prigozhin, Bateson, Maturana, just to mention a few. Yes, it is science, but of a new kind. Instead of concentrating on basic building blocks, the systems view concentrates on principles of organization. Instead of cutting things to pieces, it looks at the living system as a whole.
How can you think usefully about things in this holistic way? That's what I don't see. You can contemplate them, you can look at them, as Thomas says. But if you want to do something, if you want to get into specifics, by definition, don't you have to take things apart? How can you talk usefully about a tree without talking about its roots or its leaves or its bark?
Oh, I could. Without even naming the parts you mentioned. Well, a Cartesian would look at a tree and conceptually take it to pieces. But then he would never really understand the nature of the tree. A systems thinker would look at a tree and see the seasonal exchange between tree and earth, earth and sky. Would see the annual cycle, which really is one big breath the earth takes through its forests, providing us with oxygen, a breath of life, linking the earth with the sky and us with the universe. A systems thinker would look at the tree and see the life of the tree only in relation to the life of the whole forest. Would see the tree as a habitat for birds, a home for insects. But if you look at a tree and try to understand it as something separate, you will be bewildered by the millions of fruits it's producing in its lifetime, because only 1 or 2 trees will grow from those fruits. So if you look at the tree and see it as a member of a larger living system, that abundance of fruits will make sense, because hundreds upon hundreds of forest animals and birds will survive because of them. Interdependence. And the tree cannot survive on its own either. To draw water from the ground, it needs the fungus that grows at the tip of each root. And the fungus needs the root to survive, and the root needs the fungus. If one dies, the other dies. And there are millions of relationships like this in our world, each depending on each other for life. The systems theory recognizes this web of relationships as the essence of all living things. Only the uninformed would call such a notion naive or romantic, because this dependency we all share is a scientific fact.
A web of relationships.
Yes, but this time it is the web of life itself. The theory of living systems actually provides you with an outline of an answer to that eternal question, what is life?
Is this one of those turning points? You, the woman, I, the man, this the world. And each is the work of all. There's the muffled step in the sand, the stranger, the crippled wren, the nun, the dancer, the angel's wing over the walkers in the village, and there are many beautiful arms around us and the things we know. I don't know how the rest of the damn poem goes.